Hey, how's it going all? Just want to do a quick video on Flat Earth again. I remember I had an experience very early in the Flat Earth game when I think I got into Flat Earth around 2015, I want to say, or 2016, around that time frame. It was largely credit to Russian Vid, so started getting into the numerology, and then he has Flat Earth and stuff pretty heavy on his channel um, now and back in the day as well. So I just, did what I thought was kind of normal. I was like, I don't know, to be honest, like at that time, I'm an engineer and I consider myself, pretty good, but at math and science and stuff. But it was obviously so outlandish. Like, I was like, how could this pass under my radar and all the people around me up to that point? So, I sent it to a couple of my engineering buddies, and then one of them, and it's just funny the way people react. Like, I remember one of them quickly said, "Oh, you can't, excuse me, you can't have tides." Just like a one-line response. The other one said, "This is an actual response." I think I still have the emails. I don't want to call them out unnecessarily, but these are actually the first two guys are PhDs in physics from Rice University. Not dumb people at all. So I'm looking to people who are very, very educated for feedback. First one said, "How can you have tides on a flat Earth?" Second one said, just look at a picture. And then another of my friends, who probably is the smartest of the three, is a math major. He sent me an article about how it's locally flat. I guess people have done papers on this. I might still have the link, actually. I'll post it in the description if I still kept his email. But, it's like locally flat, but a ball. And so, I've seen that article as an argument. Then I've seen, as I mentioned in a prior video, seismic surveys don't take into account the curvature unless the survey gets, really wide or really deep, like the image that, like if they're imaging the subsurface at a very, very deep level, the seismic rays travel a far enough distance that, the curvature becomes important to reconstruct the image. This is what I've been told. But in like smaller surveys, less depth, they can treat it as quote unquote locally flat. Local is just a math term for meaning like in a small area, or close to. Is also another use for the term, but it just means like if you have a point, local to that point are just the first few points on either side in whatever units. In seismic, it could mean miles, and on a curve, it could mean 1 or 2 unit steps away. So it depends on what the person's talking about, what locally means. But they're just saying that locally flat in seismic, and then I saw on the flat Earth debates that in sailing there's an assumption of flatness locally as well, and then they have a convention. I can't remember what the number is, but there's a convention for like flatness, in a certain square mileage, and so that to me is a strong proof of flatness, because if anything is locally flat and that assumption can hold uniformly across a surface like water, for example. They do seismic surveys over water, so it holds for that as well. So in seismic and in sailing, if local flatness holds, and I'm assuming it would hold as well in that article that my friend sent me, so then it's water. There's no favorable position to apply this understanding, or this approximation is a better word. So local flatness implies flatness on the whole. Because you can then, let's say this piece of this screen is locally flat. That much of my finger, I can assume is locally flat from up here to down here. We don't know what's going on up here. We don't know what's going on down here, but we can assume here it's locally flat. But this whole medium is homogeneous. It's the same thing. It's all water. So if this is locally flat, I can apply local flatness here, 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 everywhere. I can essentially apply this locally flatness assumption across the whole homogeneous medium that has no distinguishing characteristics but just being water, for example, sitting in an ocean or a lake or whatever. So locally flat, if it's true, if it is actually locally flat, if you can get a small enough area, and it doesn't even have to be very big. This is why the experiment of just seeing a lot of different water bodies flat, or just walking across, like a long shore, and you can see that it's flat. Okay, it's flat there, or if you're flying on a plane and you look down and you're like, okay, it's flat, and then we've flown further, at level altitude, and you see it's flat again. Once you piece those things together, it becomes flat. It's like it doesn't all of a sudden become any other shape but what the assumption is at the micro level, at the local level. So the locally flat but globally, curved, or non-locally curved, falls apart. It's just a way for ball earthers to kind of affirm what is obvious to flat earthers, and what we see. And what they can't argue and debate, because we see it with our own eyes. It's just the horizon, the water level is flat from as far left and right as you look. And it's not a small distance that we're talking about either. It's a large distance that we're capable of turning our head to see on one side to the other side. And so, I can't quote what that distance is. Obviously depends on, what's going on in the air and stuff, but it's many, 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 many miles. So if a person who basically, the one flat earth experiment technically could be like, if you just have a group of people who every certain number of miles are along the coastline and just look out and see that it's flat, not even really taking elevation into account, just that it's flat, and then you kind of piecemeal those observations together, you can assume that it's flat, or like it's flat and then it raises up but it's still flat. It would be like a step function. But, we know that that's not physical for sure. No one would argue that. But so that alone, would prove flatness if it's done over, I guess a long enough observation that would satisfy people in ball earth. But to me, it's just becoming kind of embarrassing just because of kind of how obvious this is. Like all the arguments that they use for a ball earth, are falling apart, and we're using it right back against them. And in particular, in the flat earth debate with Nathan Oakley and all those guys, like very sharp guys, do not let people get away with anything that's not rigorous. And, if anyone uses that local argument, use it against them in a friendly way, of course. Like a lot of people are good intentioned in this. They just don't know. Like my friends that I was reaching out to were probably like me. They've never heard the argument before in their life. So they had to scrounge and reply with something, to sort of keep their life, from being unglued like mine has become. So, just consider that argument as a way in this sort of ball earth, flat earth apologetics. If it settles in your mind well, I think it's a strong tool to use, and just break it down in very simple terms that locally flat cannot imply non-local curve.